In the depths of the Orinoco Delta lives the Warao people, whose name translates to people of the water or owners of the canoe. This community, one of the oldest in Venezuela, has navigated the Delta's channels in their dugout canoes for at least 3,000 years. The Warao, both nomadic and agricultural, live in the stilt houses and maintain an unbreakable bond with the water and nature that surrounds them. According to their foundational myth, the Warao originally inhabited Quimare, an upper sea in the sky. It was there that Etuari, known for his skill with the bow, tried to hunt a bird to feed his people. After failing in his attempt, he discovered a new world while trying to retrieve one of his arrows. A new world became visible through a hole he had dug. Etuari descended to this fertile land, marking the beginning of the Warao presence on Earth. However, not everyone could make the journey. Those who remained behind became hebus, malevolent spirits determined to afflict those on Earth as revenge for being left behind. The challenges the Warao face today are not just the vengeful spirits of their myths, but also modern diseases and environmental problems exacerbated by centuries of encroachment on their ancestral territory. The precarious living conditions, lack of access to basic services, and water contamination are just a few of the current issues affecting this community. Despite living in a region rich in natural resources, the Warao face a constant struggle to survive in an increasingly hostile environment. Accessing the communities in the Orinoco Delta is an odyssey that requires many hours, willingness, and resources like gasoline, which is particularly scarce and critical for reaching these remote areas. The Delta, a vast region of 4,200 square kilometers, is subdivided into networks of river and tidal channels, making navigation the only viable form of transportation. Without roads or terrestrial transport, reaching the communities requires journeys in small boats, often taking several days to reach the most isolated villages. This logistical difficulty further aggravates health problems and access to medical services. Child mortality among the Warao is alarmingly high. In a study conducted in 2011, it was identified that 31.6% of children die before the age of 5. The main causes of child death are gastrointestinal infections and acute respiratory infections, reflecting the lack of access to clean water and adequate sanitation. Another critical issue facing the Warao community is the high prevalence of HIV. In 2007, the Red Cross identified the first cases. In 2011, a study conducted in 8 communities found an estimated prevalence of 9.5%. A study conducted in 2019 in just 3 communities showed a prevalence of about 3%. Although this prevalence is lower, it remains alarming compared to the general prevalence of 0.5% in the rest of the country. The majority of HIV infections in the Warao population begin as R5, and as the disease progresses, the virus slowly transforms into X4. This variant is much more aggressive, leading to a faster onset of immunodeficiency. 90% of the Warao have the X4 strain, which is uncommon in Venezuela, Latin America, and the rest of the world. Another characteristic of the epidemic is that it disproportionately affects men. In some communities, up to 35% of the adult male population is living with HIV. One element that helps explain this disparity is the role of homosexuality and bisexuality in Warao culture. It is common for transgender women, known as titawinas in Warao, to have sexual activity with men daily in some communities. An additional factor complicating the presence of HIV among the indigenous people is tuberculosis. It is a disease with high prevalence and long-standing history among the members of the ethnic group, making them more vulnerable. This disparity reflects a severe public health problem that threatens the extinction of the Warao people if appropriate measures are not implemented. In some villages, only women and children remain, as men have died from diseases, leaving these communities in a state of extreme vulnerability. Additionally, some settlements have completely disappeared, and while it is not known for sure if the causes are HIV, tuberculosis, malaria, or migration in search of better living conditions through mining, the reality is their evident non-existence. Besides health challenges, there is an internal issue that complicates access to modern solutions: the resistance to integrating ancestral beliefs with the outside world. Some spiritual leaders, deeply rooted in traditions and the role they play within their communities, often perceive modern medicine and external influences as a potential threat to their millenary practices. In their effort to protect their traditions, some shamans prefer to limit connections with modernity, which can result in less adoption of vital medical treatments and delays in practices that could improve the health and well-being of the Warao. This situation reflects the complex tension between preserving cultural identity and the need to adapt to new realities to ensure a healthy future. However, it is important to recognize that the resistance of some shamans is not a simple opposition to modernity, but reflects a response to the geopolitical complexity of the region. The history of incursions and exploitation in their territories has led these spiritual leaders to jealously protect their traditions and autonomy. Their actions, though they may seem an obstacle, are actually an attempt to safeguard the identity and cultural heritage of the Warao against an outside world that has often ignored or subjugated them. Understanding this perspective is fundamental to effectively addressing the community's needs. Integrating solutions that respect and value their worldview. Thus, amidst all the misinformation, our team delivered a message of prevention. Despite language barriers, both young and old were attentive to what we were trying to explain: adherence to treatment. With gestures, mimics, and drawings, we managed to convey the word undetectable. Minutes later, the word untransmittable. The unique formula was already being born in another language, probably the oldest in America, an ancestral, primitive, indigenous language. Is how it translates in Warao. Undetectable equals untransmittable. M equals M, 3 characters of a mathematical law filled with good news. But prevention must be more than a slogan. Policies for the distribution of medications must be a sustained reality over time. Even under the best circumstances, it would be difficult to control the spread of this virus in this isolated and impoverished area. It is unimaginable to think that the possible scenario for this ancient ethnic group is that in the future, they might simply no longer exist.